Hey James, how you doing?
Hey, Freddie. I'm good. How about yourself?
Welcome to the Build Your A-Team podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to share how veteran entrepreneurs and business leaders build exceptional teams, uncovering whether their success comes from strategic analysis, intuition, or even pure luck. Today, I have James Hahn on the show. James is, I'm going to first start off, a Naval Academy graduate. He's a squid. Yet he has gone through so much in service and also after transition in the corporate world as a CEO. James Hahn is the president and CEO of Triage Partners and also recently acquired a firm, Benton Technical Services, a few months ago. He started out as a former Marine Corps captain, led multiple deployments across the Pacific, and also in Afghanistan in 2014, where their unit was the second to last unit before the war stopped there. For James, his journey is very interesting. As he got out, he worked in Fortune 100 companies, also worked for startups, and then joined a ETA, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition Accelerator, to help him get buy his first business and then now additional bolt-ons. Um, so super excited, James. Anything you'd like to say before we start?
No, excited to be on. It's my first podcast. I think, Freddie, most veterans don't like talking about themselves, but I think it's something you have to do, especially transitioning into a corporate and civilian career.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to, and you need to share that the insights and the experiences, and especially your failures. So I'd like to understand, James. You've done quite a bit. You've seen a lot of different industries, and now you've even bought a few of your companies. What do you feel like is your secret power, right? Your superpower that makes you unique?
Eh, Yeah, I think something that I've demonstrated and do really well is how do you jump into an industry that you've never been before? How do you quickly get up to speed on it? And then more importantly, like how do you gain the trust of a team, right, of industry experts? I've done that, throughout my career. Obviously, we all did that as military officers, but I've been able to do it in a couple other industries outside the military. So I feel like that I've started to really build that skill set, and that's what, helped me lead up to this point.
Yeah, agreed. Well, how do you do that as a complete outsider, right? Somebody who has no knowledge of the industry. What's your strategy?
Yeah, I think it's again, we all have that experience as a 22-year-old second lieutenant, being in charge of a group of Marines or soldiers. I think you have to come in it with humility first, right? So you have to be okay saying you don't know and other people know more about you. So one thing I always love to do is get where as close to the work where it's being done and ask the people who are actually doing the work to show me, right? To teach me. And I think one, again, that kind of shows the humility of a leader, but also builds that relationship with your employees. And then you're also, just interacting with them, right? And listening to potential issues, right? Or potential ways that they have to, get things better. So I think that's one. And then part two is you still need to show up with confidence, right? And what I mean by that is you still need to be confident that you add value to the company, right? Maybe it's not in the specific telecom or HVAC or whatever technical skill set, but hey, I know how to, manage projects. I know how to do process improvement. I know how to build a strategy, whatever value that you bring. I think marrying those two sides is really important to being successful.
You know what? I could not agree with you more. When I first ran, just during my transition, I was given an opportunity to lead a manufacturing plant, and I came in with that humble mindset. But I don't know if I really displayed the confidence side, and that actually led, I think, us to be very stagnant, right? And ultimately, after a couple years there, that I think that really degraded, the trust that the team gave me, because it's like, got it, you're asking all these questions, this, we're teaching you, but what value are you adding? I mean, I was adding value in my own way, but not in that strategic president way, in my opinion. So how do you balance that, you feel, between humility and that confidence? Um, like, give me some examples. Give us some examples of what you've done in a brand new industry that can display that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of my stops throughout my experience was actually building up, automobile repair and collision shops at Lyft. And Freddie, if you asked me in the beginning, do I know how to change my own oil? I'd say no, right? So that was the level of technical knowledge I had. And again, I was leading a team of, 16 plus year master mechanics. So example of the humility piece is, I literally one day pointed to every single tool and said, "What is that?" Right? And it was probably dumb question after dumb question. But at the end of that, I think I learned, right? So now I don't have to ask that dumb question again. And then part two is, I'm showing that I'm not acting like I know everything, right? I'm showing that humility, which I think is important. But in terms of like where I knew I could add value and confidence was, on the leadership. And again, I think this applies to a lot of military veterans where a lot of managers in the corporate world maybe don't coach, right? Or don't try to build that team, right? Or don't try to invest in their people. I knew from day one that is what I could bring to the table, right? I'm going to get to know you, Freddie, as you're teaching me about how to do an oil change, right? I'm going to, keep the promises that I make, right? I'm going to make sure to follow up, open those lines of communication. So I think that's an example where, you could build humility, while still showing the confidence that, hey, I may be an outsider to this industry, but that's not a bad thing, right? Because I bring other experiences and skill sets to the table. So I think that's what I mean of, you can be both, right? You can be humble, but also know, like, I know where I add value to this team.
Yeah, I'm gonna add one more, just dig one more layer in this, and then we'll talk about your current ventures. But you know, in that state, how do you think about your people or your teammates coming to you and saying, "How do you solve this?" Like, how do you? It's not in your field. It's probably something you haven't experienced in business or industry, and they're saying, "Hey, how do you solve this, James? How do this is a problem I have. How have you dealt with that?"
Yeah, I mean, I think the art of problem solving goes across industries, right? So again, where can I add value? I could teach someone how to actually do root cause analysis, right? Hey, in the beginning, when you're trying to explain your problem, what do people mostly do? They already start jumping to solutions. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm asking you what the problem is, right? So a lot of the times what I do with people is, Freddie, don't tell me what the problem is. Draw it on a sheet of paper, right? Because then you can't jump into solutioning. You're trying to draw out the pain point. And then now let's ask why, right? Why is that happening? Okay, why is that happening? Ask the 5 whys, right? And get down to that root cause. And now let's start solutioning. So again, that's another example of confidence where I know I could bring that skill set. And now I'm teaching someone else. Yes, you taught me how to do an oil change, but guess what? I'm going to teach you root cause analysis that's going to make your life better, right? So that's an example where no matter what the industry is, leadership, process improvement, problem solving, whatever it is, those apply across, environments.
Yeah, I like that. I also, just from my perspective, what I ended up doing, several times, is just finding that industry expert, and then gaining credibility of whatever the solution was, that the expert would echo and or would guide us through, because yeah, they know that you don't know anything, but if you have access to those resources, hell, we have access to AI now that gives a lot of those answers. But if you have access to that and you show that you're caring about them throughout the process, I think that's where how you win. So awesome. Can you tell us what Triage Partners does?
Yeah, we're a telecom services platform and supply chain software company. So, in essence, our biggest revenue stream is we help build and install fiber internet across the country. So that's really our core purpose is, how to build fiber internet. So our customers are the telephone companies, the internet providers, the cable companies that are, offering you internet service.
Why did you end up buying that?
Yeah. So, one is,
I
I
guess, can
love
you walk
the,
us through the process real quick? Like the process of just entering Broadtree after your MBA and
yeah.
what did that look like?
Yeah. So I graduated from Berkeley and got recruited from Broad Street Partners to be an operating partner. And really the idea of the operating partner role is, develop a thesis, try to go buy it, find a company that you can buy, and then you run it as a CEO. So, I'm not a finance background. I joined the PE firm to be a CEO, to be an operator first. So really, the thesis I had was, um, one, the fiber internet technology is the fastest technology available, meaning it's not limited by its bandwidth right now. It's limited by the end technology use case. So, one day as technology continues to evolve and, one day we're in our house having some metaverse conversation, the only internet that could support that is fiber, right? Cable, Starlink, et cetera, taps out due to latency. So I thought that was, a key part of my thesis. And then only about 50% of the US had access to fiber.
Mm,
So all these players over the next 5, 10, 20 years are going to continue to build out fiber across the country. And so there's high demand, plus there's a lot of government funding going in. But the challenge is labor, right? So it's really this high demand, low supply environment. And that's where, I thought was a very good investment thesis of, hey, this is a fiber gold rush. I don't want to sell gold. I want to sell shovels. All right. And that's what we do. We provide technicians, for those customers that are all trying to win this fiber game.
very cool. So labor being the shortage, I assume then you have a robust kind of program to attract and train and retrain your people. Do you?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I think, initially the first a lot, 12 months of my investments was on the recruiting side. So again, there's a group of, labor that's skilled and knows how to do this. So how do we find those people, right? So I hired a 30-year recruiting manager. We doubled the number of recruiters. We invested in CRM. So a lot of this just kind of robust recruiting, and that was really phase one. Phase two, we're starting to look at now is how do we create our own labor, right? This labor pool in particular is aging out. Not a lot of young people want to go be a telecom technician. So now, with my team, it's really thinking about, okay, how do we create our own labor? And that's the next step here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your first priority as the CEO was recruiting. It was to get technicians. How did you go through that process where you're ensuring you're vetting for that right individual?
Yeah, yeah. I think even before that, though, I think as a CEO, you have to find out where you put yourself. That's the biggest value creation opportunity, right? So again, when I took over as Triage, it's a lot of learning, listening, discovery, right? Talking to people, understanding what the situation, and it became very clear. Sales wasn't the limiting factor, right? If I had 1,000 technicians, I could put them somewhere, guaranteed, right?
Mm.
So you quickly see recruiting was the biggest value add. So where did I put my time is on the recruiting front, right? So that's kind of why I chose recruiting. And then, sorry, Freddie, what was your question on the
Yeah,
recruiting
it's like
side?
the vetting process. What the criteria? How did you understand fit being a new member, right, of this organization? How old was the company prior to?
Yeah, so the company was a 20-year company before I joined.
Yeah.
So I actually joined on its 20-year anniversary, and then it's
Yeah.
been about, 2.5 years since.
So you're a new guy, you just bought the company, you joined, and going through the process of buying it. I think the audience would be interested in that as well. But you coming in, and how do you like the fit, right, with the existing crew, with the existing employees, with the seller that's outgoing, just navigating all of that, and you're hiring in bulk these brand new technicians. Oh, not brand new, but these technicians from outside. Like, what kind of qualities and how did you get to a consensus of what type of people to bring on?
Yeah, I think, initially just because it is a smaller labor pool, it really is vetting for skilled talent, right? That's almost hard enough is finding a qualified technician. So that was definitely step one. I think in terms of how you think about culture, I think that naturally um, integrates itself once you're within the company. It's kind of like how I like to think about it, right? The people who stay and continue to work for us are the people that continue to follow our culture, right? And that culture shifted, right? It was a 20-year company. I come in with a little bit of my own ways and little tweaks, right? And as we all know, culture reflects leadership, right? So again, new leader in place. So it was a little evolution of our culture as well. But I think that just naturally happens, right? Just
Hmm.
because of the way we work and the way we show up every day and the way we do things, the way we handle conflict, people are either gonna want to be part of that or not, right? And those that don't, I'm not necessarily afraid of churn, especially in the beginning, right? If it's not the right person, I'd rather try to find the right fit than keeping someone on that's just never gonna work out.
The recruiting process, did you end up also incorporate like assessments and other tools to kind of expedite the vetting process?
Yeah, I think, I do think of it as like two separate tiers when we think of more corporate type roles versus the technician roles. I think a lot of the technician roles, right, we leverage our supervisors who understand the technical skill set, right, and,
Hmm.
and they're putting them through those technical interview questions, similar to how you kind of interview a software engineer, right? You do a technical interview and then do more of the behavioral interview. So we definitely follow that same process. On our corporate side, one thing we put in place is the top grading interview. So I don't know if you've heard of that, Freddie, but
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's a pretty thorough process where you're walking line by line through someone's career. And, in the beginning, it's kind of like, man, this is a long process. Is it worth it? But as you see it in action, you definitely get behaviors or get insights that you may have skipped if you kind of did an ad hoc 30-minute, 1 hour interview. So, top grading is something we definitely do throughout the company.
Awesome. So top grading, you go through each job, right? And you ask essentially the same questions over again to really understand that person's performance in each job. And the interview itself can take an hour or a couple hours,
Yeah,
right? To
yeah, it could be up to like 3 hours, and the other good part of it is like the thread of the reference check, right? And it's about how you frame it too, right? Oh, Freddie, at your last company, who is your manager? Oh, how do you spell that last name, right? So you're kind of mentally getting in there, and then asking them, hey, when I contact that manager, what would he or she say is your strengths or weaknesses, right? So, like A players want you to reach out to whoever, right? Like go. I wish you could talk to every single employee manager I worked with because they will be my, best support for why you should hire me, right? And so you quickly kind of find that out when you deep dive into someone's history.
Yeah, that's actually a very big insight you're sharing right now for folks who are recruiting for people. The threat of a reference check, right? It's the act as if you're going to call and you're investigating someone's background with other references, with other coworkers and other bosses, and that process in itself will weed out folks and or highlight the ones that truly shine. And that's what you did. And in a technical background, in a technical field like you were hiring for, I mean that's pretty self. I mean hiring and finding a supervisor, it's pretty easy, right? And to did you actually go through those reference checks?
Yeah, we follow up on those reference checks. I think the other phase of in terms of recruiting is recruiting technicians was one area, but the other area is more of a development, meaning um, training and developing these supervisors and managers, right? Especially in a lot of these blue collar worlds, it's oftentimes the best technician or someone that's been a tech for 15 years is now in a leadership position. They have no sense of how to actually manage people, right?
Hmm.
So that's the other area where we targeted is, okay, how do you coach and develop these people into being leaders where that they've been trained on how to do the technical skill set all their life, but no one's actually taken the time to say, here's how you manage and here's how you lead.
Great point. Great point. Those guys, typically those who get promoted are guys who really do well technically, even in sales or ops or whatnot. Not how to lead. So, James, I'm curious how you again you bought this company, and no doubt 20 years in existence. No doubt there's underlying relationships with the outgoing seller, the probably alliances there. I mean, 20 years, long timers who've probably worked there. Um, and you come in, you show example, you set the example, you show what expectation of performance looks like, but people there aren't jiving, right? I'm sure not everyone jived with what you were putting out. So how did you go through that process of that delicate balance, right, of relationships and history and loyalties with competence and performance? How did you think about that?
Yeah, I guess first question, how I bought the business, right? So this kind of sourcing, it's a grind, right? That's the best way to describe it. You're identifying potential companies you want to target. You're finding, how to get to that owner, and then you're cold calling, right? You're cold calling, sending thousands of emails, thousands of phone calls. I used to go to conference trade shows all the time, and I'd avoid the nice looking booths because I knew that was too big of a company, and go on the outsides and find the super small booths because most of the time that would be the owner behind the table, right? So you're finding different ways to get in front of the owner, and then you have a short period of time to build rapport, build trust, where they're like, oh, I want to talk to James a little bit further. And then again, how do you continue to build rapport and trust where they're like, okay, I want to share my financials with James, right? And then you're kind of like building trust that way. So, it's a lot of just grunt work of sourcing and being a door-to-door salesman, in essence. And then the hard part is, again, when you get someone on the line, how do you convince them, build that trust where like they want to sell to you? And I view it as like three circles that almost all need to happen, right? One is like you have to find a good company. You don't want to buy a bad company, right? So whatever that means to you, you're trying to find a good company. Then there's another circle that's like the timing factor. You need to find that company at the point where that owner's really trying to sell, right? Like Freddie, I may come to you and love your business, but you may be like, well, I don't want to sell yet. I'm young. So that narrows the pool. And then the third pool is not just a good business, not just the right time to sell, but that they actually want to sell to you, right? So it's like a needle in a haystack finding that. So it's just a lot of conversations, getting in front of people. It's selling, right? Like everything is sales. Recruiting is sales. Leadership, you could argue, is sales, right? How are you selling your team on the vision, selling your team on what you want to be done? And this was a lot of sales, right? How do I convince someone to trust me, a young kid who doesn't know anything about telecom, right, to sell their business, right? So, happy to dive more deeper into that, but that's kind of how I at least got to the table of having someone in front of me.
Sure. The other part of the question where you walk into what's existing, right?
Yeah.
And you have the relationships already in place, the history, and then navigating that with, hey, are you producing value still or not?
Yeah. So especially the first one on triage, I did a pretty slow approach, meaning again, went in there with the humility of I've never started a company, especially never started a company that's lasted 20 years, that there must be some things being done right here, right? So again, what I spent a lot of that initial time is just learning, right? I sat one-on-one with every single employee. It took me 3 months, but I had a one-on-one meeting with every employee. I sat through each department, learned their jobs at a high level of what they do. Um, you know, I always say when I sit down with people, like explain it to me like I'm a 5-year old, right? And at least as a 5-year old, I can explain every single role within the company. Um, and then again, it's like naturally over time, I'm finding areas low hanging fruit where, okay, I'm gonna take that over, right? And okay, maybe I'm gonna change our weekly team meeting, right, and do a different format. They can see how I'm thinking about things. Oh, we had a change here. Okay, maybe that's a project I could take to start moving, and that's how you're building this momentum, right? You're building these small wins. Okay, James isn't as crazy as he thought. We're seeing the benefits of this. Okay, now I'm trusting him a little bit more and more. And then again, that culture of how I'm leading, how I'm setting my principles, you need to start communicating that, right? So the hardest part for me was like getting that down on paper, right? It's a lot of what I was doing, but how do I get that down on paper? So that's what I did. I created 5 enduring principles. And as any leader knows, like that's not it, right? You need to communicate that over and over,
Right.
not just say it 3 times, literally say it 10 times every single time you meet with a person. That's the only way things like that stick. So that was a key part of it. And then now once I've communicated that standards and those principles, now it's about accountability, right? Now it's about, one of my favorite books and things I mention all the time is radical candor, right? How do you, care enough about someone to give them the honest truth, right? And it's not to be, oh, Freddie, I'm going to tell you your breath stinks just to embarrass you, but it's like, hey, I'm trying to help you. So when you talk to the next person, you don't get embarrassed, right? So how to open that transparency. Because then now you're giving the person a chance to improve to meet that standard. And if they do, that's great. And if they don't, I think that's when the decisions need to be made there.
Okay. Cool. I like the transparency. Just straightforwardness. You're not trying to deceive or manipulate. Yeah, I mean, you're just there, and you express your values and say, take it or leave it, right? And the guys that believe in you will stay.
Yeah, yeah. I'll say this too. Like
Yeah.
the biggest thing with these family-owned businesses is it is a family, right? Like
Hmm.
there's even family members probably on payroll, right? So again, what I always say is I'm not trying to get rid of that family culture, but I think of it much more like a championship sports team, right? In a sports team, everyone has to play a role that adds value to the business. Even if you're the 12th man on the bench, you still play a role that helps the team. And then why I use the word championship is, I believe the championship teams, they all play a role. They all are, performing, but they also like spending time with each other, right?
Hmm.
The championship teams do still have that family type environment where you want to spend time outside of practice, right? So that's why I really like that example of, hey, it's not the family analogy. And I'm also not saying, screw that. We don't care about that. It's like, no, no, no. It's this championship team analogy, right? And that's really important.
I love it, man. I love that. And you've obviously done a lot of homework and self-study to come up with these stories and analogies and to communicate it effectively. So being there 2.5 years, James, you must have seen then some fruits of your labor. How are you guys doing now?
Yeah, yeah, we've grown a lot, right? So, we went from about 120 employees to about 400 employees over a 2.5 period, and we went from operating in 3 states to 20 states, right? So we've definitely have aggressively grown, and with that growth comes some stress, but I'd rather be dealing with that type of stress than the opposite, where we're declining. So again, the team has really done a lot of that legwork. The team's bought into the vision and the team has performed, right? And that's really helped get us to where we are now. And, I think now we're going to continue to grow in the next phase, right? Of finding other companies that we want to acquire to be part of this platform vision to hit the next stage of scale.
Yeah, and this is why you bought on this other company, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that was one. Now we provide full turnkey telecom services. So now we're in the construction game, right? So again, now to our existing customers, we could do everything from in-home installations all the way to laying miles and miles of fiber, on the open road.
James, you are if I if I would just categorize you as a person, you would be a Marine officer. I mean, I've worked with lots of Marines in the past, and I've been super impressed with the Marine officers. just lead with integrity, lead with values, principle driven, hard work. They go and get after it. And it's actually the way they think it's kind of simple. Uh, just
Yeah.
just lead like this and people will either jump on with you or if they'll jump off. So I like that. I'm curious here, you know, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with, why Annapolis? Why the military? Were you born here in the States or did you immigrate?
Yeah, no, I was born here in the States. My parents immigrated in the 80s from South Korea. So why Annapolis and the Naval Academy? It was really due to finding free education, just to be point blank honest, right? So, my parents, they immigrated here, opened up a little, beauty supply store in a town called Gary, Indiana. And if you knew about Gary back then, that was the murder capital of the
I
world.
know Gary, Indiana.
Yeah.
Lived in
So,
South Bend for a little bit. Anyway, yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
Gary, yeah. So every day after school, I'd be working downtown Gary, and that was my joke as like a 13-year-old, as a top wig salesman. So I was like slinging wigs left and right, and learned a lot there. But no, so I think that was the prime motivation, right? Due to the kind of my parents, kind of living situation, right? I just knew I had to get a free ride one way or the other. So that's how I got into the Naval Academy. Did not know about the Marines or didn't even think about that at all. I thought I was going to be a submarine guy and be a nuclear engineer and then make a lot of money afterwards doing that. But once you get to Annapolis and get surrounded by the Marine Corps culture, you either love it or don't. And I was definitely drawn toward it. So much to my mom's disappointment, I chose to be a Marine Corps officer.
Yeah, the mothers, man. I totally hear you on this one. Um, where most of these Korean immigrant mothers,
Yeah.
like ours, they want you to be like a doctor or some type of lawyer, right?
Yeah,
But you
exactly.
chose to go Marine Corps, and my mom was pretty upset. I went infantry, and yeah, she was definitely not happy. Just the whole
I,
possibility of going to war.
I want you to know, Freddie, I did get in at West Point, but chose the better
Did
options.
you really? And so you went to the dark side over there. Very cool. But so you went what? Well, I'm curious now. You actually went because you thought submarines were cool?
No. I was trying to think about how to make money. Yeah.
Well, I'm saying like West Point. Okay, that's a topic for another day. But yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. And at what point did you say, like, as you were transitioning, James, you're like, what the heck do I do? That was a really difficult time for me, and it's a difficult time for a lot of veterans transitioning, whether armed officer, enlisted, retired, whatever. Right? We're all going through that same problem.
Yeah.
How did you like think about that journey?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll share something about my journey and then also like tips I give when I talk to transitioning veterans. So I did one of those junior officer, like leadership or junior officer recruiting agencies, right? That kind of place you. So I put all my eggs in that basket. And then I had this like interview super day, 16 interviews with all these Fortune 500 companies, six-figure roles. Um, I thought it was gonna be awesome, right? I struck out on all 16, right? So I struck out on all 16. Quickly realized like I didn't really know how to interview and describe what I do. Plus, I think I was almost so rigid in the answers where that's not me, right? I'm a very bullet point, like free flowing type of guy, but struck out there and then just started sending resumes all over the place, right? So it was definitely a stressful time. I think what I say to people, and maybe you've heard this analogy, I didn't make it up myself. It's like, let's say there's a Harvard graduate, they go into a top investment banking firm, right? And then they go to Stanford Business School, then they go to private equity. On the side, they do Ironman triathlons. They're awesome, right? Star player. And then all of a sudden, they want to be a company commander of a Marine Corps infantry unit. You're not saying it's impossible, right? But you're saying, okay, there's some things that you need to help paint the picture on, right? You don't even understand the Marine Corps culture. You don't understand the ranks. You don't understand infantry tactics. Yeah, you're in shape. Yeah, you're smart. How do you do that? And I think that's a good analogy just from a transitioning veteran's point. Like that's what the other person on the table is thinking as well, right? Yeah, you're a captain. Yeah, you're a major, but like, okay, how does that make you this VP of ops role at home services, right? Like, again, not saying it's impossible, but like, that's how you got to think about the interview or internships or doing courses, whatever you do to try to help bridge that gap. So I think that's one helpful transitioning tip. The other one is like, a lot of people put so much pressure on that first role outside the military, but I think that's just a piece of your journey, right? Like, I could look back now at all my different roles and say all those things magically made me be in the position I was now, and they've all been very valuable. But that's a BS, right? That's a lie, right? Like all those
Mm-hmm.
things, I was just trying to figure it out and apply to what comes out. But in the end, like you need some experience, right? You need some different skill sets and opportunities to pair up with your military time that gets you in that true state you want to be in, right? So those are just kind of two themes I always tell transitioning veterans when I'm on the call with them.
Well, how did you go? So about your transition, you struck out from all 16, and then you ultimately ended up in
Yep.
some startups.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I started going this like junior officer rotational program. So it's a popular thing at like GE and City, right? Where you do, 3 6 month rotations. So I like that idea of I don't know what I don't know. So let's spend some time figuring out what that is. Um, but then I also got into core logic, and why I chose that one ultimately is they were just launching their junior officer leadership program. So I thought there was, would I rather be the first one of something or the 700th officer to go through GE? So I ultimately chose core logic, and that was the best decision, right? Because I did get a lot of those benefits of being that kind of first junior officer in this organization. And I learned a lot about that. So that was kind of the mortgage world. I ran almost think about like a 90-person call center team. So rows and rows of cubicles, people on calls. I did well. I could have kept going up in that org, but just to be frank, it was a little bit boring, right? Like I wanted faster pace and different things. So at that time in San Diego, I was looking at startups, and there's some little electric scooter company starting to pop up called Bird, and they were just launching in San Diego. So took a stab at that, took like half a 50% pay cut for that role, and probably worked twice as many hours during the week. But I loved it, right? It really felt like being off on a fob by yourself, right? Where it's like just figure it out, make it happen. So really loved that environment. And then from there got recruited from Lyft, right? So that was the first turning point where I no longer had to apply for jobs. People were kind of seeking me out, and I was like, oh, that's a cool
Yeah.
change and transition point. So then joined Lyft, and same thing, kind of started up a new vehicle repair business with that in Lyft. And then around this time too, I was doing a part-time MBA at Berkeley, right? So I was kind of working, studying, doing it all. And that's where I found out about kind of entrepreneurship through acquisition. And this whole idea is, hey, you could be some, 30 some year old first time CEO of a multi-million dollar business. It almost felt too good to be true, but the
Mm.
more I learned, there was a path to it. And again, I think that's kind of the humble, confident approach, right? I was humble enough to know what I didn't know, but also confident in kind of my experience up in that point where, I believed I could make a difference in a company.
Yeah, no, I love that story. We have very similar roots where I too after after service, right, as I was getting out, went and joined did one of the Cameron Brooks type companies, right? These headhunting firms, and got placed into a leadership development program as well, and did that route too. And my thought process about transitioning folks, I think, kind of build on what you said is it's generally the lack of exposure, right? It's what you don't know, what you don't know, and what to try to overcome that and fill those intel gaps of what does this industry or this company look like. You have to just do a lot of homework, and you have to talk to people, and you have to just try to get in the door and learn, and then you can figure out, hey, what works or what doesn't work. And yeah, I think many people leaving the military are fixated on kind of the title and comp. But you said it right there. You said you went and you joined Bird for half the pay for twice as many hours, and you were loving it. You love that environment. So you have to really understand like what makes you tick. And typically that's through trial and error, isn't it?
Yeah. I think too, like you ultimately make a transition where, especially, service academy guys, right? You're always thinking prestige. So that's what you chase, right? You chase the best company names or investment banking or, McKinsey, but you end up talking to a lot of people in those roles. They're not really enjoying what they do, right? So
Mhm.
at certain point, it's interesting when you make the shift, like, what do I want, right? And Freddie, like yourself, I met a lot of, entrepreneurs or veterans that started government contracting businesses, and a lot of them have a great life, right? They've created a great living for themselves, doing something they impact and value. And yeah, is their name ever going to be on like a magazine and things like that? Probably not, but I bet they're much more happier than some of these people at prestigious, organizations. So, naturally, I think everyone chases prestige, especially service academy grads out of the military. But over time, you figure out like what's the life you want and what's the, things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, it's a whole self-awareness thing because you don't really know yourself when you're in the military because you were
Mhm.
told what to do and you did it to the best of your ability. But despite that, I would just add whatever people get into, first job, second job, third job. I mean, just knock it out the park. Like do your
Yeah.
best and just really learn, but also do the best that you can. Don't feel like you deserve better. So you just your performance decreases at work and your attitude is bad. Just do your best and it will come, I believe. I've learned that the hard way where I didn't do my best at some of these roles, and it 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 was a big learning experience. Going back though, James, now we talked about your your hiring in volume technicians. That was a big focus. How do you now think about hiring your lieutenants, right? Hiring your executives. What kind of strategies do you use for that?
Yeah, it's been hard to think about, right? I shared a little bit about the scale that we're growing. So it's interesting, right? Because as you grow, um, some of these roles that people are wearing as their second or third hats, you need to be that a main role in itself, right? So you need a level of experience and skill set in those roles that often comes from these bigger size companies, right? And also you want to hire for where you want to be. But the challenge is, we're still small enough where that person, that new leader, right, is probably going to still have to get in the weeds and roll up their sleeves, right? So I think that's really what I stress and try to find in my lieutenants that I'm hiring, right? Who has kind of the experience, skill set, right, of where we need to go, but also is not afraid to work hard, right? And jump in as needed into these tactical areas. And it's hard to find, right? It's really hard to find. And I think about it both ways, right? There's the interview process, but there's also an onboarding process, right? Like
Mm.
you can do everything right in the interview, but if you onboard or, bring that leader up to speed incorrectly, like it could be a bad hire there. So I view it both ways, but, that to me is just, big. And what I like to do in their interview, at least, is like sell them against taking the job, right? So, for Freddie, I'm going to tell you how in the weeds you're going to have to be. I'm going to say, hey, we may acquire another company. They may not even have this function, and you're going to have to pinch it and go be that analyst, right? Like, are you ready to do that, right? And, hey, at this, at the company you're in now, you probably have teams of teams to do everything for you. We don't have that here. Like you're going to be looking to yourself. Oh, you want an analysis of that? Like, okay, Freddie, like you're gonna have to figure it out, right? In the stage
Mhm.
we're at now. So I like to spend a little time convincing people not to take the job, and because the ones that really want it, right, I know or understand what they're getting themselves into.
Agreed. I like that. I like that a lot. When you um, when you think about just growth from now on, and you're building these acquisitions and bolt-ons, are you thinking about bringing on GMs to run this? Is your strategy to just maintain what you have and increase responsibilities for folks at Triage, or are you looking at bolting on other leaders for that?
Yeah, a lot of these bolt-ons, I think they do very well operationally, right? So I think a lot of those will inherit operational leaders. Um, I think again, where I could bring value is okay, how do you coach up some of the leaders into, again, how I envision leaders leading, right? And
Hmm.
that takes a lot of coaching, development, right? Buy-in to develop that. But that's why I tell all my managers, right? Like, I don't value you on what's your output. I value you on like what's the output of your teams, right? And that's the force multiplier, right? So just because you can firefight fires 50, 40, 60 hours a week, that's not valuable to me because you're limited in the hours in a week.
Hmm.
The better part is like, how are you solving processes? How are you developing your leaders, right? So that they're able to go fix problems. Like that's how you're thinking about leverage. So that's kind of the shift that I love to see in managers, right? And that's what scales. I think in a lot of these back office teams, right? So a lot of these smaller type of companies I'm acquiring, they're very good on the operational front. That's where a lot of investments are, but maybe it's not on the HR side, the finance side, the marketing, the cybersecurity. Those are stuff that I think, we build kind of at headquarters, right? And that could
Hmm.
support these follow-on acquisitions.
Yeah, good. Uh, how you talked about bad hires during your time. How how good are you looking back at hiring? Do you feel like most people you hire stick and they are performing? And then part two of that would be just how do you I'd like to hear some of your horror stories, right, of hiring and lessons learned from that.
Yeah, I think hiring and firing is new for any veteran, right? Like that's what you didn't have to do as an officer that you have to
Hmm.
do as a kind of in the corporate world, right? So yeah, hiring was entirely new for me, right? A lot of it was like, oh, I'm just going to spend some time on a call and see how it goes and have a gut instinct, right? So definitely a lot of lessons learned from that. And again, how to be more structured and formalized. I mentioned top grading, right? How to think more strategically about who to involve in that interview process, how to give themes to your team on what to vet for. Are you making it clear what the objectives for this role are so they even know what you're hiring for? How do you kind of structure that debrief process? So at the end of it, I'm not already talking to you, Freddie, about what I think about that person before you
Hmm.
walk in. Now you're biased to my argument, right? So definitely putting more formalized organization structure and hiring has been a learning experience for me, right? And then, on the firing side, again, I never had to do that, right? I think my first job out of the military, they were doing some type of layoff. So right away I had to fire someone. And I was like, I don't even know what to do.
Hmm.
I remember just sitting in there with HR and the person, right? And I was probably talking way too much than I should have to fire someone, right? And again, a lot of those things you just need reps and learn from experience on how to handle. But yeah, I'd say I was definitely weak at those early in my career and
Hmm.
still learning how to do that. In terms of like horror stories, um, I don't know if on the hiring side I could point too much. But I think on the accountability side, like that would be more of an area where I've seen myself continue to need to develop, right, and improve on. And what I mean by that is I think especially early in my career, I always leveraged toward I could fix someone, right? Like I am a good leader. I am a good coach. Like I could build a bond with Freddie and communicate with them, set the standards and get you up to where I need to be. I think at times I almost did that to a fault, right? Versus acting quicker on something. And I think the biggest impact is not to that person you're evaluating, but to the peers, right? The more you leave on a subpar employee, I think that really does impact the other star players in your team, right? Because they're seeing the standard drop. And I think I didn't really understand that early in my career. And it's a lot of too, like, I also have a lot of empathy for people, right? So I want to see them succeed, but sometimes you need to think about what's better for the overall group rather than, one individual person.
That's that's really great. I mean, that's profound what you said about just spending where are you putting your time and the impact of your actions on the rest of the team where yeah, it could be you can be trying to do the right thing, but for everyone else, it's just why are you wasting time with this guy? And standards from the entire organization are coming down. So that's really, really great. What do you see veteran business owners, entrepreneurs do wrong when building their teams?
Yeah, I think one is like you need to think about yourself, right? And knowing that you don't know it all, right? Like
Hmm.
it's literally can't be strong in everything. So I think this is where, like, when I think of diversity, right, it's kind of diversity in experience and skill sets and thoughts on, right? So, I, I think a mistake would be for a veteran entrepreneur to just hire other veterans or other ops heavy folks. I think that's what we normally lean toward operations, right? We like the execution, come follow me, like, charging through. But
Yeah.
think about an entrepreneur kind of world. Probably that veteran hasn't had much experience with QuickBooks, right? Probably
Mhm.
doesn't has much insights into the financial statements. Okay, as you build out your team, is it important to think about a strong finance person, right? To think about cash flow, right? And think about or sales, right? Like what are some of these other areas to balance you out? I think is the most important part, and that differs for every situation, right? Maybe maybe you are a good marketing guy and you lean toward doing that stuff. Okay, maybe you need to balance it out with something else. But I think that's something in the team. And then again, like EOS has that kind of visionary integrator mindset. Again, I saw myself doing this, right? Like as veterans, you just automatically are drawn toward the integrator mindset, right? Like
Mhm.
I rally the troops together, I get things done, but I really do think to scale, you need to shift toward more of that visionary seat, right? Where you're external facing, you're thinking strategically, you're thinking about external relationships and building that team who is going to be your integrator, right? To carry that forward. Because if you're spending too much time working in the business, no one's working on the business, right? And I think that's a huge unlock for the leaders that do make that transition, right? Shifting from internal to external facing, and then more importantly, developing a person or a team to really integrate and run the operations on a day to day.
Yeah, I liken that to yeah, you just said it at the end. The integrator focusing down and in, ops heavy, while visionaries are thinking up and out, strategy, sales, revenue, right? How to increase that, along with other obviously other things to help you become better, right? And cut costs and efficiency and whatnot. But to have that to get to be that visionary, I feel you have to kind of know the industry. You got to know what the levers are, and you have to kind of put your time in being an integrator somewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess yeah, again, but at some point, right, for your business to really grow, you can't always be about optimizing, right? And
Right.
efficiency. You need to go chase some revenue, right? You need to go find how to make more money, right? And that's where you got to build that go-to-market engine and think about how you're going to increase the top line. And again, I don't think that's comes naturally to a veteran. Um, it's something that you build, like you said, over time through experience or observing other things.
So some of these veteran entrepreneurs listening, yeah, you're probably spending, or examine yourself. Look at whether you're spending most of your time optimizing things, and like Elon Musk says, optimizing things that don't matter. Right? Most of us do that. So I'd like to just understand one last thing, um, and then we can wrap up. But I'd like to understand, James, like who you have as mentors with your business side, your military side. How do you have one? Do you pursue them?
Yeah. I think I'm not a good networker, right? Like for Freddie, I could tell you're probably like you're the master networker, right? That's definitely not my strength is stuff like that. But I think where I learn a lot is through books and podcasts, right? So I'm big on reading, learning about biographies, reading as many business books as I can, right? Learning about podcasts. And that's what I consume at 2x speed, driving to and from work. Even at, I'm one of those crazy guys while working out, I'm listening to a business podcast. Like that's how I get mentored
Mm.
personally, right? And that's what I've used.
Cool. Short answer. I love it. I've done the same. Um, I've done the same in the gym, listening to Jim Collins or something, which is really odd, but it works. Cool, James. I liked this conversation. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts for folks who are interested in entrepreneurship, veterans who may be interested in just taking that step? What kind of words of encouragement do you have for them?
Yeah, no, it's a growing community. It's a tight-knit community, right? So if you talk to anyone in the space, it's just like the veteran space, right? That they'll be open with their time and will reach out. So, learn as much as you can. I think the other part is, um, it's like anything else, right? That it's hard and there's risk, right? There's risk that you may not find a company. There's risk that even if you find a company, it's going to go under, right? Like entrepreneurship means risk, right? So don't necessarily think about this as a safe avenue, right? Versus entrepreneurship, starting your own thing. It still has the word entrepreneurship for a reason, but again, for those that do want to take that leap of faith and do put it all and with a little luck, like I think it's a great career path. And I think a lot about it as being a company commander, right? I worked in a lot of different corporate roles and different levels, and that was the one thing I missed, right? That ownership of the company, right? And that's why, I really love being the CEO seat.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. It was fun. Now to our listeners, go build your A team. Thanks.
Thanks, Freddie.